I would have known when my son was going through his struggles with dyslexia in school. So glad that you came back to join us again and share this fantastic information.
Well, thank you. I've always said I'm not a teacher who teaches dyslexia. I'm a mom who became a dyslexia therapist. It really is from the parent perspective of watching your child who is intelligent really pull away from school. And you know they love learning, and you know they're engaged, and you know they're this inquisitive kid. And you're like, it doesn't make sense that my child doesn't want to go to school, or their stomach hurts, or their personality is actually changing a little bit because now they're having to be defensive because all the teachers are saying, why don't you work harder? Why don't you care? Yeah. So we're going to be addressing that inside of this presentation as well, because it sure is the core of making that academic progress. So thank you for having me again. I do appreciate it. It's almost time. I get so excited. It's like being at the gate, like, oh my gosh, we've got so much good information. And those parents that are out there, yes, I'm always this hyper. I had some of my students, they were like, Mrs. D's like this every single day, just something's not right about her. And I will tell you, I absolutely love being an educator and a teacher, and every student that was not just in my classroom, but in my building, they were my kids. And it's like sunlight for me to be in a school. So, and I know our teachers have a lot going on right now. It's hard to be in there. So just a shout out to your teachers. They're working hard. There's been a pendulum shift again, and they've all had to make that adjustment. So very proud of our teachers in our profession.
Absolutely. All right. I've got just less than 1 minute till we get started. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us. And for those of you joining us on Facebook, welcome as well. We're so happy to have you here today. Looks like we've got a great representation. I see people from Austin, Dallas, several from the Panhandle, Canyon, Amarillo.
Yay.
Got someone from Connecticut. Welcome. We're so glad to have you. All right, I have got 12:15, so we're going to go ahead and get started so we can give Nancy all the time we have. So once again, I want to welcome everyone for being here today, and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for today's webinar. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin. I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of Parent Training and Information Centers, or PTIs. PTIs are funded through the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. And the 4 PTI projects in Texas are PACT, PATH, PACT, and TEAM. Our mission is to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. Also joining us today from Partners Resource Network is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning, our Support Specialist, Chelsea Rivas, and our Technology Specialist, Zach Hidalgo. If you're having any technical difficulties, please reach out to Zach in the chat box, and he will assist you with those. For those of you that are needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you'll follow the link in the email, you can get your certificate of attendance. Also, we will have a time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. If you're joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook, you can type your questions in the comments. We are recording today's webinar, and the recording will be available on our website at prntexas.org and on our Facebook page. So let me introduce our speaker and get it turned over to her. Today's guest presenter is Nancy Disterlic Hannagan. She graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a Bachelor of Arts in Early Childhood Development and Dallas Baptist University with a Master's of Arts in Teaching Multisensory Instruction. She taught in Keller ISD for 12 years in both elementary and high school as a classroom teacher, dyslexia therapist, and special education teacher for students with autism. Nancy served as the regional dyslexia consultant for over 150 districts in the Dallas area for Region 10 Education Service Center. Her role encompassed training teachers and administrators in current laws and best practices. She is currently the owner of Dyslexia Connects, a teacher training company. She is a certified academic language therapist, a licensed dyslexia therapist, and a member of the Academic Language Therapy Association. She enjoys serving districts and students to develop the skills to become independent and confident. She offers a new perspective for teachers working with students with dyslexia. Nancy, welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Parents, I just wish I could see your faces, and that's my favorite part, is actually connecting to you. I am a person with dyslexia, and I have kids with dyslexia. So I say more I'm an advocate as a mom, and then became a dyslexia therapist. Today's session, my apology right now, it's got so much information and we're going to go pretty fast. It's because it's just too important to leave out. And that way, if we just do a sip of the information, if you want more additional information, we can go in, dive deep later on a different training. This training right here that I'm going through is actually a full day, and we're just doing it in the 45 minutes. So buckle up a little bit. It's a lot. So I want to thank Partners Resource Network for having me here. We're going to talk about how dyslexia is a processing disability and how knowing that information will transfer into the accommodations so your kids are more independent and confident. This is my company. You're welcome to go there for some of the additional resources that we're talking about today. So you're like, where are those at? That's where you get it. So you can just Google Dyslexia Connects. She already gave my wonderful intro. And I want to also say that caretaker fatigue is what's happening across our nation. I have the privilege of meeting teachers all over. And the number one thing is just the kids came back different after COVID, and the struggles parents and teachers are both trying to navigate that. So I want to just, anytime you can feed a teacher or give them additional support, like you being here today, helps them help your child. I hope we're able to replenish some of our teachers. These resources that are listed here are also on my website. Many of the things I'm going to be talking about came from this rich resource link. So please make sure you check those out if you have not. And then I like to start off with this. These are 4 different samples. And the reason why is because dyslexia, the definition from IDA and other places, it talks about it being a reading and spelling disability, which the name dyslexia, dys meaning not, lexia meaning letters, IA condition. So it makes sense. But it's also processing. Dr. Sally Shaywitz in her research will tell us that it is also oral language. You could tell a child to do something and they will misunderstand the vocabulary. They might misunderstand the directions. They may have left and right backwards. They could have trouble telling time. All of these things, looking at these 4 students, the assignment was it was career week, and a nurse came in and they were to write labor and delivery nurse or labor and delivery at the top. They were to give the facts that they learned, and then the salutation at the end was to say thank you and their name. You can see that there's 4 different responses to those directions and different abilities. The person that is the student number 1, that student and student number 2 continue to be in the same classes through high school, AP classes, and think the same. But the way that they produced print looks more like 2 and 4, 2 and 3. The misspelling of the words, the spacing, the handwriting, the following of the directions. Those are the way that the student processed language, and then the way they expressed language in written form, you can see it. Now, the reason why this is special to me and why I have information is this was a 3rd grade class. My mom was Mrs. Jones, the nurse, and my parents' house caught on fire a few years ago, and they pulled out, this is from Mrs. Mackey's class. I went, I wonder if we would know if I had dyslexia now looking back. And absolutely, you can tell that I was not performing academically at the level in which I could think. So we're going to talk about dyslexia really briefly. I hope you came here having a lot of information about dyslexia, but you came for the additional information. But I got to do a sip of the information. This is a pendulum from Dr. Pickering. She's at Shelton Schools, and it shows you that these are processing disabilities and that they're on a pendulum. Well, that means that some of them can overlap or intertwine. And so sometimes when we're looking at dyslexia, you might also be looking at ADHD or ADD. You might be looking at dysgraphia, but the processing, they overlap. And so sometimes we don't have an accurate view of what our child needs. And then that shifts what we need except for those appropriate accommodations. So that's why it's so important to really know how your child struggles and in what area. And I always put this out there, Texas, you guys are doing a great job, but I always put this out there that you can identify dyslexia inside of it, your IEP, the determination, that's the Dear Colleague letter. So Dr. Sally Shaywitz, if you've been a part of dyslexia, she's the one that put dyslexia on the map, in that it was the first time we saw functional MRI imaging so we could see dyslexia. She also puts in her book that we've known about it since 1861, that there were people who were intellectual, but were print avoiders, or word blindness is what it was called. Then we had structured language. Orton Gilliam came around. And so we've had a lot of process on learning about these students with dyslexia. Here's that left hemisphere where language is developed and where language is utilized. And there's a deficit with students with dyslexia. The good news is with remediation, we're able to build those pathways. So if you're familiar with dyslexia, we typically see that they read in their frontal lobe, the right hemisphere, and then that left hemisphere. What we also know is that frontal lobe becomes more attuned, meaning if you are blind, your hearing becomes more attuned. This is from Louisa Moats. If you're deaf, your vision becomes more attuned. So for the student who has a disability in their left hemisphere, we see more automaticity in other areas in their frontal lobe. So you might see them be a great leader. Maybe they're great at oral language. They're artistic. It's because they have automaticity in that frontal lobe. This is remediation. This is helping give you the rules and structure of language so the left hemisphere can start rewiring and creating those pathways to read. They need additional information, but this is when you have fidelity, it's that structured, explicit, direct instruction. So that frontal lobe, we're going to talk a lot about that. I have found in our handbook, in the State Handbook of Texas, it lets us know that cover overlays do not help with the development of the left hemisphere. That is true. But some of the strategies we're going to use, they help with the stamina and they help with the organization. When print left hemisphere has a deficit, the frontal lobe is able to compensate. We want to utilize that compensation or automaticity in the frontal lobe to help us in accommodation so the kids feel independent and confident and they have skills and strategies so they can do the work that their peers are doing. So we want to be doing this with remediation, but we also want to utilize the frontal lobe with some of these colors, pictures, and emotions so the kids develop skills. This is just a chart that I created to explain to my parents that it's not just one thing when you say, oh, the student's having trouble spelling or reading. You have other factors that you want to look at. What's their cognitive ability? What's their working memory? Do they have ADD, ADHD? Do they have less exposure to print at home? Or is there anything going on in the family? Do they have dysgraphia? So when you're looking at accommodations and your child to develop their own self-accuracy, when that's accurate, then they have the appropriate accommodations and support. And this is on an individual basis. The parents have to be the ones that are keeping the records and asking good questions. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So that way, when you go year to year or campus to campus or even change districts, you are the expert on what your child needs and you help advocate within the schools. This is a chart I've been using for years. It actually came from one of my students. And it is not, it's not a research-based. It's just for me to communicate to my students and to my parents that these are ways that dyslexia may manifest. And so you can look at these and say, that is interesting. There are different ways that processing language or processing symbol can manifest inside your student. So like telling time, no one ever told me that I had anything with dyslexia. I just thought, what is my problem? Well, when someone asks me what time it is, I have to put my pointer finger on the 3, go around with my thumb, and the big hand means the minutes. Well, by the time you've asked me what time it is, time has elapsed. Well, I didn't even know that till this chart, and I started asking more of my students. Are like, Mrs. D, I have trouble with that too. Get a digital clock. Well, for me, 12 and 21 are often, if I'm tired, they're the same number. I have to touch and say the 2's in front. It's more 21. That's a lot of dialogue. It's because the symbol part of my brain is struggling, but my thinking part totally understands the difference between 12 and 21. I'm just having difficulty processing those symbols. So this is very helpful for your child to learn accuracy. I use this and with every one of my dyslexia students, when they come in, I talk about it. Where do you feel like you struggle? Have you even heard of any of this? Some of my kids are like, Mrs. D, none of that is me except 2 of them. Okay. And then I have students that they're like, Mrs. D, all of these are me. So you want to be accurate with your child, and you want your child to have an accurate view of themselves. This is real quick. I can do an entire training on this book. It's my favorite book that I have had the privilege to navigate. It is not, someone said, Nancy, that's not a fun read. Well, I like academic books. So this is Dr. David Sousa. It's How the Brain Learns. And he's taken this book and put it in multiple fields of dyslexia. Multiple fields. So he has how the dyslexia brain, how the EL brain learns, how the twice exceptional brain learns, math, reading. So he's put it in several content areas. Here's what we've learned. This is that processing part of the brain. So the brain's goal is to learn new information. Every kid, if you look at Maria Montessori, we enjoy learning something new. When new information comes in, we have to decide how to sort it. So each of us, if I say chocolate, some of you are like, meh, whatever. And some of you are like, same. It is like a way of life. We pattern things coming at us differently. The reason why we are to protect ourselves, and protection is different for each person. This process is done with chemicals. There's 2 main chemicals. One is endorphins and the other one is cortisol. And we're going to talk about how those are imperative to the learning process. And this is the model. This is Dr. David Sousa's information processing model. And just think, dyslexia is a processing disability. So information is coming in, and I have so many wonderful things, but we're going to do an overview right now. The brain, new information is coming in, and the brain decides, am I safe? Am I in fight or flight, or everything's okay? So if you're on a webinar, you're sitting at home, you're in your chair, you're dandy, that means you can take in new information because you're safe. Immediate memory says, I came to this webinar because my child has dyslexia and I want to learn some things about it. That's wonderful. So your brain's deciding whether or not to take on the information I'm giving you or to not care about it. So let's say you go back and say, oh yeah, I heard that webinar with that lady who talked really fast. Well, did you see the books in the background? Oh, I didn't really pay attention. Your brain is seeing them, but because it doesn't matter, you deleted it automatically. You didn't even have to think, the books, interesting, I don't need them. The development of your brain to automatically delete or keep information, meaning sort new information, is developed at 5 years old. If you don't develop that, then you have ADD or ADHD, according to Dr. Sousa. That means when kids have a lot of information coming at them, they have to think about, is this important or not? Think about how they have to process all that new information. That's hard. So you came to the webinar, you feel safe. I'm talking about dyslexia. You're interested. You allow it to go to working memory. Working memory is the place where we think. Working memory only has so many spots to hold. That's your cognitive ability. So let's just say your brain has 10, but if you have trauma, there's space being taken up in working memory. If you have a learning disability, there's space taken up again. So you have a limited amount of space to take in new information, which is what your brain is craving. So it's the processing of this that's happening. So you come here, you're working with dyslexia, but you go back to your school or you go back with your child and you're like, hey, let's try this new strategy, and it works. Now it's going to be in long-term memory because now you use it and you retrieve it and you put it back in long-term memory. So that's the process of information. Here's the key. When you have stress, remember at the very beginning, am I safe? If you're not safe, you have cortisol and the receptors in long-term memory go, it's protecting you. It's saying, hey, we're not all right. Whatever you're doing right now, your blood pressure's up, your digestion's down, your eye dilate, we're not okay. We need to really concentrate. You're not safe. The other is true. If you're in a great situation and you love what's happening and you're sending endorphins to your brain, the receptors open up and now new information can go into the brain. And so the brain is like, hey, your dilation's good, digestion's good, your heart rate's good, whatever you're doing, this is fantastic. Do it again. My child has a learning disability and they have a disability in print, and the environment I send them to every single day is print, and their teacher doesn't know a lot about kids with dyslexia, and she keeps telling them, you need to care more, you need to work harder. Why are you so lazy? Let's sit you out at recess so you can get your work finished. What the child is getting at school is cortisol, so less ability to take in new information and to process it. So when our children have accurate identification and an accurate view of themselves, and they understand how to advocate, and they feel confident in a room, they're more confident, they have more endorphins, and so more information is being able to process in the brain. So we really want to encourage, and I'm not talking social emotional, which a lot of people talk about enabling or positive. What we want for social and emotional is accuracy and confidence. We want to give them the skills to be independent. So let me see on my time how we're done. Okay, we're doing really good actually. Okay, we're going to go really fast. These are the 3 books that I want you to look at: Late Lost Unprepared, Driven to Distraction, and The Happiness Hypothesis. They're all really great books about processing. Late Lost and Prepared, ADD and ADHD, it breaks it into parts. It really gives you good information. And Driven to Distraction really goes over with a parent about a child who has a race car brain but needs to develop their brakes. So just additional for you. Here's the 3-pronged approach when you're really accurately supporting a student with a disability and dyslexia. All 3. So if you have a child with diabetes type 1, the first thing you do is don't say you're going to have to put shots in your body for insulin. The first thing we do is we educate them on the pancreas and on insulin and what their body is doing and why their body might be functioning different. That's the social emotional part. We connect to their body and why they need what they need. The skill development is the insulin itself, right? That's when you give the kids the remediation that they need so they can decode and read and spell more accurately. The accommodations is how to navigate my disability in the real world. We've got to educate our teachers, our parents, and our students on how to do that, just like diabetes. How do you go to a birthday party and not eat the chocolate cake? Well, you have your sugar-free cake, or you eat beforehand, or you make sure you take your medicine. All 3 of those areas have to be addressed simultaneously so the child develops the progress academically and emotionally. So connect emotionally so your child can grow academically. That's how we do it. We want to make sure your child has accuracy on themselves. This is a book that I recommend, The Secret Life of the Dyslexic Child. The first time I read it, I thought it was an autobiography. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how much I avoided print and how I leaned on my friends with just conversation. Hey guys, what are you going to have for lunch? Oh, that sounds great. What are you going to put on it? Okay, me too. I didn't look at the menu. I didn't even know I was doing it till I read this book. So it's a great way for you to support your child because you start seeing how they avoid print. My friends are always saying, Nancy, you make it harder than it is. I'm like, I'm really not. This is my student. He was in ROTC. This is high school. And he loved ROTC. He's a fantastic kid. And the drill sergeant said, you guys need to know your drills backwards and forwards. Have those on my desk tomorrow. So my student did. This is a high school boy that has dyslexia and dysgraphia, and he is such a good kid. But the teacher didn't understand what he was doing. And so all I knew is my student was dropping out of ROTC. I did not investigate the why. A few weeks later, the sergeant came in. He said, what is going on with your kid? Why did he drop? And he shows me this paper. Well, what happened is this beautiful sergeant, he's a good man, did not understand the disability, and he shamed him in front of his class. Like, what are you doing? When our child, our student, was actually giving more than 100%, he misunderstood what forwards and backwards meant, and he put way more effort into his work. And if you are a parent, you are seeing your child put in lots of effort and not getting out of it what they had anticipated. Looking for Heroes is another great book. It's not the famous people, it's the ordinary people who have dyslexia and their success. Brilliantly Dyslexics, another great way for these kids to accurately have a view of themselves, that just because you have this disability, the thinking part of your brain is still capable of doing the things that you want to do. This is a workbook. I highly recommend that your teachers get this if they are a dyslexia teacher. It's books that support the integrity of our children with this disability and teach them how to their strengths of innovation, creativity, and leadership. So it's a great workbook to include. And change the attitude, you change the performance. I had a student that was with me, and he continually would sigh and hunch over. And I taught him that when the body changes, then the chemicals change in the brain. And if I went like this, I didn't have to say, hey, body, we're about to fight. You're going to throw a big punch. As soon as my body does this, it knows to send adrenaline. I'm about to fight or flight. So I teach my kids to roll their shoulders back and be very confident in their posture, shake their hands and be prepared for things and say, I am confidently uncomfortable. What a switch for these kids. Socrates is always saying to ask the questions. So I always make sure I ask questions back to my kids. Please keep doing this with your students or your children, because you want them to become thinkers. And it's not sarcastic. It's not disrespectful. It's in a place of love and respect. So when a child asks me, Mrs. D, where do I put my paper? I will say, thank you for being responsible and knowing your paper needs to be put away. Let's walk through that. Where's a good place to put it? Do you remember where we did it yesterday? Do you think you'd put it in the trash can? I don't say it like this. Well, do you think it goes in the trash can? That's different. You want to give your child the skill to start thinking things through and to put it back on them so that processing can develop. Teach your child to be calm. When you teach your child to take control of their emotions, control of their body, and control of their breath, you're allowing cortisol levels to go down and endorphins to have a place to collect. So you want to teach them how to do the breathing square. Well, how are you doing that at home? Practice it, model it. When you feel your own, like, oh my gosh, we got to get to soccer and I've got to get dinner on the table and the baby needs their diaper changed. Stop. Model for your student that when they take a breath, they're able to think more clearly. That's why in Lamaze, when a mommy is in that high stress place of giving birth to a baby, they'll teach them how to breathe. It's imperative that we teach our kids how to stop and just breathe. I'm going to whiz through this really quick. These are parent night options. I do encourage your school should do it every October and April. These are all the different things you have this available to you. A dyslexia simulation, have a speaker come in. Anytime you have a teacher or principal that has dyslexia, have them talk. Have a tech plan, have all your tech resources there. Have your librarians come. What? We have dyslexia. Yes, have a library night. And the librarians will tell them how to access books. Yes, a lot of great ideas right here for you. And these are parent advocate questions that are going to be available to you. Inform parents how to build resilience in their kids. First, ask your kid what they need, because you want to get right and accurate information. Their perspective, what's happening in the classroom, is how they feel, but they might be getting more support than they realize. So there's a middle ground between what the teacher thinks is happening and the student thinks is happening. So ask your child questions first. Then it's time to go ask the teacher, favorite question, how much time did you think this assignment would take? A lot of times that's one of our breakdowns, and we then have to reconnect on ways to do homework. And there's lots of other resources that are available. And guess what else, parents? The schools sometimes don't train all the teachers the same way. This teacher in second grade loves technology and Learning Ally, and this teacher over here is like, well, they need to learn how to read everything on their own because of STAR. Parents have to be the advocate and know what their child needs, and then work with that teacher each year and start at the beginning. What do we need to do so our child showcases their intelligence, creativity, and integrity, and not their disability? So those questions are very helpful. Dyslexia simulation, this is just so you have the information. Here's some great schools in Texas that we're already doing a parent night. This is Gear Up at Highland Park. I love this. This is what they did. It's like a bingo card. And the parents and teachers, kids with dyslexia, got to learn what resources do we have in technology? How do I use them? How do I access them? That way it's not teacher to teacher or campus to campus, but our district supports kids with dyslexia. Love it. What's Your Shine is in Grapevine. This is a great book on just telling your students to figure out where their interests, their needs, and their talents all come together. This is a field trip. This is a mom and dad trip. This is a sleepover. Go over there with your friend group. I highly recommend that you check out this place, The House of Shine by Claudia Beanie. Dear friend of mine. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. We want our kids to have these skills to be confident. So I know I have dyslexia. I know how it affects me. I'm starting to build accuracy in myself and how to advocate. And so now let's go into metacognition. That's when I feel my ownership. I know what I need. I know when I need it. That's self-actualization. That's when our kids are confident. They don't have to go, I don't know, I'm just not smart. I don't know, I need more help than everybody else. When they don't understand why they need it and how they need it, then it changes their cortisol and endorphins, which changes their processing, which affects their dyslexia. So I have this poster up in my classroom because I tell my kids, we get to choose what we're going to do. Sometimes your body goes into fight or flight, but then I get to decide what to do about that. So we teach them how to be responsible for their body, responsible for their thoughts, and that facing it is the optimal way to respond to a situation. Sometimes we've got to be quick, but sometimes we can just face it. Here's the first strategy, part to whole. Please, parents, this is my favorite. Well, I say favorite a lot, but this is one of my favorites. Your babies are the ones who are these great big thinkers. They love good ideas. Oh, is it already 12:45? Okay, I'm okay. Whew. All for a minute, I was like, I thought I was supposed to be done. Sorry, time is one of my, I model dyslexia and ADHD, so you're getting to see both. You're welcome. Dyslexia kids are these big picture thinkers. I love having them in my class because you'll be talking about dinosaurs and their brain goes in this wonderful creative place or a whole bunch of knowledge. But when I ask them to write it down or to read about it, they might print a void, but their thinking is there. So I love modeling this for my parents. Anytime you have an idea for a kid with dyslexia, then you have to help them with the processing. Are we being creative? Are we adding detail? Are we expanding on the idea? Or here's our deficit, is when I'm dissecting it. I'm taking an idea and I'm going into the definition, the list, or describe. This is the first ring of education. And this is where dyslexia kids struggle the most. Not in the higher level creative part, but in the memorization and the blurting out of fact. Pretty cool when I teach this to my students. They're like, what, Mrs. D, you're right. And I'm like, yeah, your thinking is all intact. It's learning how to break things into parts that we're going to work on in my class. Love this. So how do I do that? One of my first ones, this is a great game. Have it at home. They don't know that they're working on part to whole. I start using vocabulary. What is the pattern? What shapes are you using? Another great one is pattern games. This is for the younger babies, but they start seeing that things have a pattern. They break them into parts. What are the different ways? Shape, color, location. Shape and location. We're going to talk about that in words and spelling. Play a game like this first. Use these shapes and move them around and say, look how we utilize shape, and we divide it up into, I don't know, can y'all see that my phone just did that? I don't know if that popped up on your screen. That they can play with it and decide what to do with shape, or they have to replicate a shape. Spelling is replicate. Vocabulary might be experiment. So you start using part to whole in a very creative place where that frontal lobe is engaged with spatial reasoning before we work into spelling and written. Let's see. There we go. This is the next one. Learn to draw animals. Please get this for your kids. There's a lot of them out there. You can even Google them online and just get some, but it's part to whole thinking again. Mom, I can't draw that dog. It's too hard. I agree, but let's see if we can break it into parts, and then you can do the whole. This teaches our kids to calm down, do one thing at a time, and to be successful. Highly recommend this being something that you practice at home for all of your kids. I actually used it in the high school kids as well. This is just to let you know that that lower level of thought, that first floor is facts, then how we process information, and then creative. And a lot of our dyslexic kids, I love showing them that they're great at the creativity. They're great at the processing. It's the factual part they need help. So I actually teach them the process of school is teachers will give you something that you already know, review, and then they'll give you something new information, a new story. Sometimes they don't even know the pattern that there's a new book like every week. Sometimes they don't see that process of the pattern. Then the teacher's going to challenge you and give you worksheets or homework, and you're going to practice it. Then a teacher's going to assess you and say, what did you learn? I had high school students, when I put this on the board, they're like, Mrs. D, I never even realized that's what school does. I'm like, yeah, about every, when you have a 6-week cycle or each week, your teacher's going to do this pattern again and again. Mrs. D, that helped me so much. I'm like, I know, it's the processing. Here's a way that I take processing. Use highlighters. I call them SALT because many of my teachers, it's too easy. Some of my parents are like, that's too easy. There's no way that would help a kid with dyslexia. It even says in the handbook, it's not about color. No, but what you're doing is when you use color, you're helping me read faster. You're changing my rate. You're changing my engagement. You're changing my understanding. Inside that first example, I've highlighted the word apples in the chart, but I also highlighted it inside of the question. Now my student with dyslexia can see that they're both pink and read a little faster. I also say, what color do you see questions? And I highlight questions up for them. The line on the page, a lot of kids are like, I know, I'm not as smart enough to finish the whole page. No, they come to Mrs. D's table and I say, hey, do you know what? This activity is just that challenge for me to see mastery. I'd like to just have you do 2 for me to hear what your understanding is. And then if you want more practice, you can after that. I know a kid with dyslexia is intelligent. I know that they need a little bit more time to process print. I made sure their integrity was intact when I navigated a piece of paper. What's happened is my student has endorphins instead of having cortisol when they start a project. We broke it down into parts so they could feel like they could do the whole. And if you're an adult, think about it when tax season comes or Christmas time and you've got to get all the gifts, you've got to decorate the house. When we have lots going on, we're overwhelmed and it makes everything seem harder. These students have a disability in the left hemisphere and reading is overwhelming and they do so much better when we teach them. All we need to do is break that into parts so that way you can do it. This is an example of my student. I had him only for 7 months, 1 day a week. We did the social and emotional and the accuracy for himself. He was in a school district that knew he had dyslexia, but they did not do dyslexia remediation. They thought he had dysgraphia. But with a parent who made a decision to also learn some of these strategies of breaking into parts, utilizing technology and an accurate view of himself and how to have social and emotional confidence, in 7 months, this is his work. I do believe that many of the students that I was able to support, it was more about the inaccurate view of themselves and cortisol than it was the actual disability that was hindering their progress. And so we want to make sure that we give those kids that advocacy and not just saying, oh, dyslexia, you're going to be great. Accurate view of themselves. So people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Kids need to know that you care about them by seeing them accurately, not by just giving them praise. So again, that 3-pronged approach, we just did social emotional. Now let's go into some skills. Structured literacy, the Dyslexia Association is telling us about science of reading. Texas, you guys are leading the way because you have the reading academies. Reading League is sweeping the country because they're saying structured literacy should be in our tier 1 instruction. Very proud of that. And now I'm going to give you a little quick tool. Okay, it's 12:49. We're doing good. On sight words. Do you know that sight words make up of about 60 to 80% of the books from kinder to 3rd grade? And do you know with dyslexia, sight words are really challenging? And when I started training teachers years and years ago, they're like, well, they're not dyslexic, Nancy, they can read. Okay, tell me, let's walk through that. They can read chocolate, father, dinosaur. They can't read of, is, where, when, there. Those are some of our babies. Here's why. The left hemisphere is not doing the reading, the frontal lobe is. And they've associated picture to chocolate and they've memorized the whole chunk of the word. They're not decoding. What is an of? Of should be spelled UV for me. Off, it should be OF. Why would you have 2 Fs? I don't know the rules. So sight words are very challenging for our kids. So what I have done is I have taken Fry's list and modified it. So the credit all goes back to Fry. And I'd have teachers, the way I've been doing this for about 15 years now, is just drawing lines. I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and make a sheet for them. This is on my website. So you have the condensed list, just means that it's the first, I think I did the first 100. Then I have the complete list that has all 1,000. And the first list, the font is bigger because we're usually looking at younger children, but sometimes it's our middle and high school kids that have not gotten the fluency in sight words. So this is a process that I do with my kids, but I have I have a parent that pulls out my kids in the hallway, and this is parent homework. This is not a teacher thing. This is a parent-child thing. We have to review our sight words just like you warm up an athlete. They stretch their muscles. Our deficit's here. So I have my kids do these sight word warm-ups. This is the complete list. You need a baggie and you need note cards. Preferably you can do white with the color highlighter they choose or colored note cards, whichever your family chooses. Do not put them on a ring. Those babies memorize those words. We want to not do that. Color pictures and emotion, frontal lobe, automaticity there. Let's work on those sight words there. What we're going to do is the child is going to pick a color and their sight words are that color the whole time. Why? That pathway is already developed for them. 2, they have to pick a theme: spaghetti, robots, soccer, puppies, whatever they choose, but that is their theme from then on. What we're doing is we're building a color and a picture pathway to stick sight words to instead of over here. And then the kids are going to draw it, making it multisensory. These worksheets are already on the my website. That way the book is already completed and you'll say it's Joe Rivera's dog book. His color was yellow. So we'll go through that Fry sight word list. They only get one word at a time, Mom and Dad. A lot of times they're like, let's push them. One word at a time. Once they come to a word, there were 2 boxes. I went too fast on that. There's 2 boxes. The reason why is when a student comes to a sight word means say it as fast as your name. What happens is a lot of our kids work really hard on a word and we go, that's a sight word. Well, they're young and they don't know what you just meant by that. So what you want to do is if a child works really hard on the word, let's say this, this, give them the check mark. That's the social and emotional part, the accuracy. You read that word and I love how hard you worked for it. Now we want to be able to read that word as fast as you say your name. So as fast as you read your name. So what we want to do is have them go through the sight word list. Once they find one, it goes into this book. And remember that drawing book we gave them? They're learning how to draw part to whole. And then they create a sentence. The sentence can be one that you do with them. This is not a writing assignment. Parents love to correct their spelling. Parents love to correct their handwriting. No, this is a sight word book. Leave them alone. The reason why is we want them to go back to this book and feel safe. It's okay. This is not a writing assignment. So we have the sight words that they're going to practice before they read every night, and they're going to read their sight word book. Once they've mastered a word, it can be taken out of the cards, and they only will do one book at a time. And there's about 10 to 12 words per book. Once they've mastered that book, they don't read that book again, unless they want to. When I do this consistently with my students, I can increase their sight words and get sight words into memory within a week, 1 at a time, 2 at a time a week. There's some progress. And then guess what? They enjoy getting into books because they know more of the words. This is the instructions, and that is also on the website because I know I went over that really fast, but it's all available for you. If you have a child with dyslexia, please get this book. It is my favorite, because when you have dyslexia, teachers say, when you say, I can't spell the word circle, where do they send you? To the dictionary. Did you know circle is not in the S's? I spent hours looking for it in 3rd grade. So this is their dictionary. And then in older ages, this is their thesaurus. What I do with this is my students, when I hear them have these juicy sentences with Mrs. D, we're talking about this weekend, they're like, Mrs. D, I had the most delicious pizza. Well, what do they write inside of their writing? The pizza was good. So at teacher table, I pull them back. I pull out their book. Every one of my kids has their own individual one. And I say, what's your favorite color? And they'll say, Mrs. D, I like purple. I'm like, okay, let's find it. The other day you said the word delicious. You used it appropriately. You have the vocabulary. Now I want to see it in your writing. So let's find it. We find the word. We put a sticky note to mark it. And I'm like, okay, that's now one of your words in your writing this week. They have independence and confidence because they can find words for themselves, and I don't overwhelm them. They're not to read it. This book is a tool for them. Then those wonderful words can also be on a word list for STAR. So I love that book. Okay, I put that in there twice. This is for spelling. I do not use this as a teaching. I use it for individual students. So if I have a student who's consistently not spelling would or should correctly, I'll pull this out because the frontal lobe is looking at the pictures and they can connect to it. And so that is how or I may tape them on their desk. And this is for all my kids, not even my students with dyslexia. If they have a word that they're wanting to have more support with, then I have this on their desks and they all know that, hey, we're building our vocabulary, we're building our spelling. Grade level reading, it's emotional. I am not a strong reader. I don't like being called on to read ever. And I'm an adult who can read. So whenever you're asking me to read, this is my emotion. But I think most of you who don't have dyslexia, this is what you have. And we want our kids with dyslexia to feel that way. How do I do that? make it safe. Do not put me inside of a grade level book without being aware I need support. Don't make me ask for it, and don't make me fail first. Put on my floaties. It's a vulnerable area and we need confidence going in. So here's the ways you can do it. Remember, the deficit's in the left hemisphere, and we want to, with remediation, support that. But when I'm going in to that book, these are some strategies that I may need in my frontal lobe. That's making the font bigger. It's copying the page and letting me practice. It's helping me do nursery rhymes, so I'm getting the rhythm of reading. Doing those sight words. I'm telling you, I've seen more progress with those sight words. So look over this. These are safe strategies before you ever get into a grade level book for these kids. Okay, now we're getting into accommodations. I've got about 7 minutes and I can do it. Here we go. I know you got, I wish I could see your faces. And you're like, wow, who can talk that fast? For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Well, I had that in my classroom because of STAR. And I was like, you guys are not measured by this. You're all wonderful. Well, I had a student say, Mrs. D, the fish can climb the tree. How? Put it sideways in a river, Mrs. D. I went, accommodation. I never want to change my expectation. I just want to change how I do it. You, the parents, have to be the experts on accommodations, because from district to campus to teacher, it's going to look different in the classroom unless you have communicated it. And I don't mean saying, oh yeah, oral accommodation. They had it last year and this year. How are you using oral accommodation in this classroom? And don't be afraid to let your kids be uncomfortable. Don't enable them where you're like, oh, they need all this support. Pull some of the support away sometimes and see what your child can do on their own. We want their independence. So you want a communication with your teacher. That I always revert back to the physical body, like physical therapy. If you have an injury, when you first have that disability or that injury, we have lots of support, medication, a brace, someone walking with you. As you develop and grow and understand the injury and you start becoming more confident, then we start weaning you off and you have more independence. Then we go to strengthening. Well, when you're from elementary to middle school, you might have to go back to the beginning again because school's different. It's not one teacher, you're changing classes. Or the teachers might not really support you in the way that you had in elementary. It's more lecture and grab notes. So you have to make the adjustment and have that communication with your teachers of what the support should look like this year, not enabling our kids, but advocating accurately. And guess what? Accommodations are not just between the student and the teacher. All of us have a role in accommodations for students with this disability. We would not do this with any other disability that was physical that we could see. We would make sure that their needs were met everywhere in the building. We need to make sure that we do that. I would take this into an ARD meeting and just say, I want to make sure all of us are on board on how my child is supported everywhere. And you have to know that the dyslexia could manifest in the content, like it's a new subject, algebra, or it's a new subject, we're writing essays, or if it's the connection. If you had a teacher who is multisensory and engaged, a Mrs. D teacher who is really hands-on, well, the next year's teacher might be more lecture. It's not that a better style is better, but the student with a disability might need more support in one teacher's classroom versus another. Parents are the ones who have to be familiar with what they need. These are the questions I ask teachers. You have this available to you to look back on. How do we empower our teachers so they are also engaging and asking what the student needs and how they can be supported? This is my favorite chart. And the reason why is because this allows you, the parent, to watch when your child is moving from it being an academic to becoming a behavior issue. And many times behavior, it is just an invitation. Our children don't have the maturity to say, you know what, I think my dyslexia needs a little bit more support so I can advocate for myself. They don't have that yet. And so this chart is kind of like the pain chart where you can ask the child, you might not show the chart, but you are prepared when you start seeing your child do things that aren't typical of them. I don't care about my homework. The teacher doesn't like me. I hate school. No one likes me at school. They're verbalizing an emotion because they don't know how to say, I need more support. And I will tell you, they've done studies and research. A student would rather be known as being mean than stupid. And so our kids really need us to be the adults in their life that are noticing the different patterns and then going back to the teacher in the school and saying, I think that we aren't getting the right support with this teacher or this school year. What did we go to online? What is different? So we've got to ask those critical questions in the state of our child so that we are not dealing with behavior, we're dealing with academic success. We want our kids resilient and confident and independent, but a lot of our kids are disengaged. I love this chart. Okay, we're going to go real quick. I've got like 3 minutes, but these are all fast slides. Technology is not an enabler. Technology is fantastic. If your child had arthritis, we wouldn't say, well, we don't enable her and give her medication for anti-inflammatory, or I don't want to have her have a brace during her walk in PE. No, technology is wonderful for kids with dyslexia, and they're going to engage it. In Texas, on the TEA Technology Integration Plan, we have lots of resources and support and research-based information of why technology benefits kids with dyslexia. Here's a website for you to check out. Nancy Watson created. It's all the free technology tools that are easy for us to access, and she has tutorials to teach you how to use them. My favorite one are audiobooks. Please make sure you don't just put a kid on an audiobook. You have to teach it. They've got to learn how to listen, stop, regurgitate what they heard. Build their stamina from 2 minutes to 4 to 6. Stop at 6 for a minute, maybe. Then go up to 8. You can build a child's stamina for listening up to 20 minutes, but you have to scaffold it. Don't just put them on audiobooks and think that they can follow a book. Learning Ally has these tools available to you. If you're an active parent, you're familiar with Learning Ally. Immersive Reader, it's fantastic. Check it out today. If your school's not using it, get your staff available. It's free, speaks several languages, increases the font size. It can read to you. It breaks the words into parts. It can use cover overlays. Can't talk enough about how much I love Immersive Reader. Speech to text. Many, many ways I use speech to text. My favorite one is a student who doesn't like books, doesn't like to read. I get permission from my parents, and I have my students tell me a story, and I'm recording them, and then I will print out their story and read it back to them. What? It's the first time that they realize that talking and reading are correlated. So I have my students all my students, not dyslexic, all my students got familiar with speech to text because my GT kids as well, they had these vocabularies that they might not be utilizing inside of their print. I got them familiar with utilizing it. Then if I wanted to decode or if I wanted to show how to spell a word, I use their own language, their own pathway that they're used to saying. Then they connect it to print in a personal way. Love speech to text, text to speech, both. Here's a tech plan you can take to your schools and personalize it if you'd like. You're making the school accountable. Who's going to train my child? Who's using the technology and how? Remember, I talked about this teacher's using Learning Ally and this teacher doesn't read because of STAR. You need to make sure when you say oral accommodation, what does that mean for my child and what do we have available? This is a real quick one as well. I did not like the library as a kid. And then we asked kids in the Texas area, what did you think about the library? And they said the same thing I did. I got confused between fiction and nonfiction. And when the librarian would say, Nancy, go get the book on aisle XKLM.21, really? And I had to read my books this way. They had different fonts and they had different lettering and they had different sizes and the library was just not fun. We want those librarians on board. We want our students confident going in there. They don't know your child has a disability. Parents, introduce yourself to the librarian. Introduce your child in there. Take time. Ask her if you can meet after school one day and just navigate the library and get books. Great place for you. Here's some audiobook posters that we wish that you had inside of your library so that all kids know that audiobooks are available. This is the letter to encourage you to reach out to your librarian to ask them, hey, I never thought about the librarian not knowing my kid has a disability. Yeah, they don't. They're not a teacher of record. So make that introduction available to you. There's a video here on how to connect to the librarian. This is that student I showed you. And then here's a really like zippity quick resources. Chris Wooden, if your child's having trouble with math, this is a way to look at math with spatial reasoning. Matthew Peterson teaches math without using vocabulary. What? Yes, he does. Great for our kids with dyslexia. And no, they don't have dyscalculia. It's the vocabulary and the transferring of letters. Our dyslexic kids sometimes show that they have trouble in math, but not calculating. Nessie, any type of lesson you're learning with your remediation, Nessie's got cartoons and engagement that will help your kid seal that. Kindle Learning, oh my gosh, best tools. If you can ever hear Jennifer Hasser speak, she's fantastic. Cursive Logic is a resource for handwriting. And then Accommodations. There's Accommodations Central, and also the Dyslexia Association has some for general classroom and also for your secondary on your way to college. So make sure you're checking out those additional resources to be specific for your child. Here's those links that I had talked about. And if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life believing it's stupid. I said up until the age of 43, when I became identified with dyslexia, that I was smart enough to know I was stupid. I believed that my whole life and dealt with anxiety and the emotion. Once I knew I had a disability, it changed the trajectory of my life and my kids. So this is dedicated to Tyne Miller for all of her dedication, for all of our families out there. Her legacy continues. And thank you for your dedication to serve students with dyslexia. This is my website. I have additional information, or you can reach out if you would like more to go dive a little deeper. I know this was really fast. So thank you for being here today. And thank you to Partners Resource Network for asking me to be here and to share this information to help our parents. Parents, thank you for being here, for going through that so quickly. So I will take questions for the next, I think, 8 minutes.
Thank you so much, Nancy. What fantastic information. As a reminder, if you're joining us on Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comment section. So first question we have is, we have a parent asking, what kind of accommodations could parents ask for a math class?
Oh, well, here's what's so funny is I'll have a teacher who's automatically using where they can space it out, where they can write inside of a graph, or they may already have highlighters. If your teacher's like, we don't use that, then it needs to be the accommodation. I do also recommend you checking out Chris Wooden and Mr. Peterson, so that way you can see spatial reasoning on a way to explore math. Another great way to do math is the teachers, if you go online, there's some teachers who will do the concept and it's already videotaped. It helps the child to review it or to hear it again. So I would go to the teacher ahead of time and say, do you mind, let's sit down with our child, with my child, with your student, and navigate out loud where the struggle is. Because many times the kids with dyslexia, it's not the computation. And so it's actually the vocabulary. Can I go over a test ahead of time with you? Many times it's just the test anxiety, and they go in there and they needed actually the additional time. So again, when I'm with my kids and my teachers, it's the accuracy. A lot of times kids just say, the teacher hates me, when we've got to know the why and how come. And so it's kind of takes a while. And sometimes I will tell you, it took me like a month or 2 months for me to figure out, oh, I know what they're needing. Ask the teacher at the beginning of the year, my child has a disability with dyslexia, and we really want to showcase his intelligence and his engagement. What are some of the strategies that you already have in place, or can we work together throughout the year so that he's able to continue his motivation and his skills? So start that conversation at the beginning of the school year, and the accommodations need to evolve with the accuracy of where the deficit is. Many of my kids, what I found at the high school, middle school ages is I got to see a test from last year and navigate. I broke it into parts, and I was like, okay, so this is where the computation is. Let's divide it in rows, put lines on the page. Let's use a highlighter with the symbols first. And then the ones that's our vocabulary, let's break that into parts and look where the questions are. Many times in math, it has to do with the reading. Great question.
All right. Any ideas on how you could motivate a high school student that has dyslexia and ADHD to use assistive technology? They said they're using it at home, but won't use it at school. They refuse it at school. Any suggestions?
To let you know, that is a big one. Kids don't want to look different than anybody else. And so there's lots of different ways. The first one was we had parent nights in October and April, and we really made technology the thing. And so when they saw, oh, you mean lots of kids use it? Yeah, we've got kids that are using that aren't dyslexic. When they realized they weren't different, that changed. Number two, it was really the education, the teacher, and that communication. Is she saying, Fred, do you want your technology for this test? No. So it depends on the communication inside the classroom with the teacher. And sometimes that was all the conversation I needed. The other one was, if the student's able to use the technology in a separate room, would they like to leave the room? Some of my kids were like, please let me leave. And some were like, Mrs. D, I don't want to leave. So then we go to earbuds. And so the students just allowed to have their earbuds in, and then they're able to read. So I have a lot of different, but I have to go to the accuracy. Why is my student not wanting to do it? Is it some teachers they will and some teachers they won't? So you've got to start asking those questions to the child. And sometimes it might be their coach. I don't want my coach to see that I'm weak, or whatever they have in their head. And you're like, oh, okay. So in that teacher's class, we'll do it this way. So accommodations should not just be note exchange, oral accommodation, extended time. What do those mean for your child specifically? And they should change year to year, teacher to teacher. I know I went a little long on that one, but I saw a lot of my kids who would not use assistive technology. Great question.
All right, next question. What remediation have you seen or do you recommend for a 4th, 5th grade student with dyslexia that has been heavily impacted by COVID and is reading several grade levels behind?
You know, I got asked this by districts and teachers for many years, and I apologize for what I'm going to say because it leaves you like, ugh, it's a great teacher. I have seen fantastic programs in the hands of people who are just following a script. And I've seen teachers who are just starting out and learning it, but they have this passion and understanding of kids with dyslexia, and I see the kids change. What I have experienced is the students who have a block of accuracy for themselves and understand how dyslexia has manifested in them individually. That's when I see the program start working. So that individual that I showed you, the work between after 7 months, the growth was because once he understood how dyslexia affected him personally and how he could be empowered by it and advocate and get those skills in place and use technology, all of a sudden I had a student who was now engaged for the program and the remediation, and I saw the progress. So that 3-pronged approach, the social emotional is understanding why I need it, that self-actualization. The skill development has to be that great teacher, and I've seen many, as long as it's Orton Gilliam based, different ones help different kids at different rates. And then you're making sure they understand how to utilize accommodations and their teachers understand what they need specifically. That's when I see the progress, is when all 3 of those are happening. Now, the Orton Gilliam based, the best teachers, oh my gosh, are the ones that are trained in more than one, because they know how to choose the right resource for that student's development. That's when you see the most progress. So just like in any other field, right? You want to go to the doctor who's done the surgery more than a few times. So your teachers who have that background and expertise, and if they're trained in more than one, that's when you're really going to see the progress. But Orton Gilliam, if it's an Orton Gilliam program, they're all good, but they're individual to which student responds to the different practices. Another great question.
All right, in the interest of time, we're going to make this our final question. Are there any programs out there that can teach parents how to help their children at home?
You know what? There's parent groups. So Decoding Dyslexia is a parent group that is going to advocate for parent, not only how to advocate inside the classroom, but also the resources that are available. I love the, if you'll go to Understood, they've got such inspiring stories of parents and how they've helped their kids. The International Dyslexia Association welcomes parents to come to their trainings. We've got lots of parent groups. That's when you go in there and you learn. I didn't know about Kindle learning. Well, as a mom, you can walk around and see what skills and strategies are there, just like the therapist. And then you can bring it back to your school and say, hey, I learned this at a conference. So there's a lot of tools and resources if you guys start becoming engaged. Decoding Dyslexia is probably the first place I'd start, but the International Dyslexia Association, of course. And then if you start Googling it, in the Texas area, you have Stand Up LD, and that is in the Dallas area, and they will be a plethora of information on how parents can be impacting their child so that they are doing the things at home that support their child. So there's actually a lot of resources for you there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nancy. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And thank you again, Nancy. What a fantastic amount of information that you've shared with us. We're really excited for all of that information and how we can use that to support families and students. So thank you again. Just want to wrap up and thank all of you for coming.
Yes.
I'm going to stop your share and I'm going to share my screen for just a minute, Nancy.
Okay.
All right. As a reminder, we did live stream the session today, and the recording will be available on our website at prntexas.org and on our Facebook page. If you are needing a certificate of attendance, you will be receiving an email to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you follow the link in that email, you can get your certificate of attendance. We do have some upcoming events that we want to make you aware of. First of all, on March 7th, we have Fostering High Expectations and Presumed Competence for our students with Mary Baker Bunisa. That's going to be on March 7th. And then we're going to review the special education issues that are currently before the 88th Texas Legislature on June 13th. And that is with Stephen Allman with Disability Rights Texas. Other upcoming topics are parent participation in IFSPs and person-centered practices. On the screen, you'll find our contact information. Please check out our website, prntexas.org, for information on upcoming webinars and events in your region, as well as lots of information for parents. And like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you so much again, Nancy. Thank you for all of this information.
Thank you for your time, and parents, thank you for being here. What a treat that you chose to be here in the middle of your day. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. We really appreciate this. Was really fantastic.
Okay, but is your head like that was too much? That was a lot.
It was a lot, but they get to have all those resources with